I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hey, y'all. Before we get into this episode, we do have exciting news. Our podcast has been nominated as Best Local Podcast here in Savannah by Connect Savannah. Every year, they have their Best of competition. It's a very acclaimed competition here in Savannah. And so it's a really big honor to be nominated for it. We really do need your help voting, though. You can vote every single day, and we have a link in our description for it. So it is under Best Local Podcast for the most haunted city on earth. But while you are there, we are nominated for some other various ventures. So Savannah Underground is nominated for Best Local Theater Production, and Chris's improv troupe, Odd Lot, is nominated for Best Local Comedy Troupe, and then JT was nominated for Best Local Theater Director, and that is under John Taylor Timmons, if you didn't know his full name by now. So, but we do really appreciate you guys voting, and it is a big deal if you win this competition. So let's be the first ghost podcast to win that category.
Come on.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And today we are back with a Q&A.
Woo!
Woo! It's been a long time since we've done one of these.
Q&A Tuesday.
Knock the rust off of it.
Absolutely.
The old brain.
Off the old brain. So if you guys have questions and we did not read your question, please utilize the Q&A button on TikTok. You can find us under Haunted City Podcast. That is where I find all of our questions because it makes my life a lot easier than scanning through all the comments and things on our podcasts in our TikToks. So thank you to those who did submit some questions, and I'm excited to get into this. But first, JT, you have a few announcements for us?
Yeah, super quick. Like we say in every single episode, become a Pair Junkie. We want to grow our family, and it really, 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 really helps us. Like, there's a lot of support there, so we really appreciate that. And there's 0 ads in anything, and I make sure that everything is, put up with no ads, early access, and exclusive stuff. So we are also going to North Carolina, Western North Carolina. We're going to shoot like 3 or 4 of them bad boys on some hauntings up there, including Helen's Bridge, which is terrifying, and it's great. Yep. So, yeah, definitely become a Pair Junkie.
And we might talk about the moon-eyed people since they haunt the mountains that our house is on. So,
oh boy, yeah,
so that's fun.
That is fun. That is fun. If you don't know what a Pair Junkie, if you don't know what a mobile podcast is for the Pair Junkie exclusive, basically what it is we actually go to the haunting and we tell the story at the place of the haunting. It's really, really fun. We've shot a couple, and there's a good amount on Patreon right now. So that also like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Rate us 5 stars if it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you haven't done that already. But yeah, smash that like button and subscribe. Yeah, oh yeah. Is that the thing that you were talking about?
Yeah. So for those of you who are Gen Zs, that's for you. I'm trying to get hip with the young people.
Oh God.
Oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
Beware.
Beware of me.
All right, let's jump into the questions. Here we go. Question number 1 from Ginger Millennial. Woo-hoo. We've had Ginger Millennial questions before. Random 1 a.m. ghost question.
I feel
Excellent.
that.
I know. Those are like the best type, right? All right. Do y'all believe a spirit can hurt you if you tell it not to? Like, at what point do your boundaries not matter? Ooh.
So,
starting off heavy.
Right.
Love it.
It's interesting. I've always had this concept, this idea that it is a question of your personal will. If your will is greater than the spirit's will, you will prevail. If the spirit's will is greater than your will, the spirit will prevail. And sometimes that comes in the form of faith, and sometimes that comes in the form of ritual, and sometimes that comes in the form of just bullheadedness. So it is my belief that a spirit cannot assail anyone who has fortified themselves, who has who calls out their boundaries and is very strong-willed, because spirits don't know the limit of what we can do. However, when we have a lot of doubts, when we're kind of fearful, where there's something inside, or when we're pulling from a place that isn't necessarily true, like, not everyone's faith is strong, and they're calling upon a faith that's not that strong, the spirit could conceivably bypass what you're trying to set up as a wall. Your wall is only as strong as the materials you use to make it. So some ghosts can do harm even when you tell them not to, if you're not utilizing the absolute purest of your intent. However, a lot of ghosts are really weak, right. So don't let that scare you. Just know that it does not have to be something regimented or religious or anything like that. It has to be something that you truly believe will protect you. I've said this before, that I have on occasion carried like a knife with me on a ghost hunt, and I felt more secure by having it, knowing that I'm not going to cut a ghost, but just having that sensation of confidence that came from having it. The ghost doesn't know I can't cut it. And the ghost doesn't know that I can't do damage to it, because the will inside of me, the part of me that says that knife is protection, is strong enough. So, find the things that you feel strengthen you and that you feel secure with, and utilize that as your source of faith, because some people very, very easily and very well use the Bible as their source of faith, and that does. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard how protected and how they were able to drive back the sensations or the fear or the thing that came at them, because they spent their whole lives dedicating to the idea that is where protection came from.
That was in our last ghost mail. An example of that was in our last ghost mail, where the lady,
the sleep paralysis.
Yeah, sleep paralysis.
Absolutely.
And she
and that is another thing.
That was Corinne.
Very rarely do they talk about this, but sleep paralysis, I've heard in many instances, can be broken if they call out to God. Mm-hmm. That is not an uncommon event. And even if that's just reaching into your subconscious and smacking it around a little, that's fine. But again, my personal belief on that is your will versus the spirit's will, and the threshold is there, because some spirits are very willful. They have strong wills, and so you have to come and face it. And that's why, like, children, for instance, are so susceptible, is because they haven't built up a faith system that is all, that is powerful enough to overcome a very parasitic spirit whose will is all about
strong wall.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I like to start with saying that most entities are going to respect your boundaries, because I would say on average, for most people who don't go into spooky places often, do not do like what most ghost hunters do. You're very unlikely to encounter evil entities, because you're not putting yourself in those places. If you encounter entities, a lot of times it's going to be your just standard entity that's going to just do oogity boogie type stuff that might freak you out. But if you tell them, most of the time they're going to stop doing it, unless they're just an a-hole ghost, essentially. But in the concept of, if you did meet a stronger entity, a more malevolent entity of sorts, I find that a lot of people feel protected with knowledge, knowing what you're encountering, and staying calm, staying level-headed. A lot of times that builds this wall for people, because they're like, okay, cool, this is what's happening. I already know how to handle this situation. So a lot of times just reading books and things like that make people feel more secure, because they're like, okay, I know what a demon is, or like I know what this particular entity is, or whatever.
They know what not to do.
Right, exactly. It's kind of like, you remember in Hocus Pocus, where basically Allison would carry around the salt, because she read in the book that witches can't cross salt.
Oh, yeah.
And so when Winifred Sanderson comes into the room to grab the book, she throws this like salt circle around her, and she's like, ha, and she was like, I'm protected solely because I put table salt around me and things like that. So that's a good example of,
could a witch use her broom to?
That's an excellent question.
As a witch, I will tell you, I can step through salt. That's a
question of knowledge.
Right.
If you say, "Oh, if you stepped over this line, you'll burn," do you want to risk it?
Right.
If you're an entity that doesn't have that same information, you're like, "Oh, yeah, that checks out, right?"
Right.
You've heard this, right? If I step over that, I'm going to burn. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Because a lot of things are, again, will based. And knowledge is one of the greatest tools of building your will and making that wall really strong. The more you know, the more fortified you are.
Yeah. So, like Chris said, if objects help you, find the object that helps you. A lot of people like crystals. A lot of people wear talisman. They wear, all sorts of things that make them feel protected.
Even crafting it yourself.
Right.
Because the activity is a ritual. Making something is a ritual because you have to do it. You have to focus. You have to put it all together. And then when you've made it, that really does. It's like, I made this for a purpose. And usually that purpose sticks.
Yeah. Even sigils, which, you can learn how to make your own sigils. I know people who put sigils everywhere. People carve them in the bottom of their shoes. They put them in everything. So, just find what works for you. But overall, most entities are going to respect your boundaries, truly. Right.
Yeah. When you think about, how many murderers do you know personally? I'm hoping it's few.
Or maybe that's the fun part.
Or maybe, or maybe none. People go their whole lives without being murdered. So that should tell you something. Not as many murderers as you think.
Right.
For some reason, I feel everyone knows that I feel protection with religion and whatnot, but I also feel a weird protection of like basking in the scary.
Okay, I would like to make a statement about that for you particularly, though.
Oh, me? Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Because JT likes to act tough when he's like, I wouldn't be afraid of a ghost, blah, blah, blah. So we had a ghost in our house the other night.
God. This literally happens all the time.
Yes. Okay, so we had a ghost in our house. It wasn't our ghost. It was, I'm pretty sure somebody who was staying in the Airbnb above us. I'm pretty sure it was one of their ghosts. And sometimes ghosts get bored and they move about. They have some free will as well. So it decided to come into our apartment. Mind you, there is a button that JT tried to teach Argyle how to talk with. If you've ever seen on the internet, people teaching their dogs like feed me, things like that. Well, JT's got an interesting sense of humor. So he recorded this button to say, "Feed me, Daddy." And basically, that training program really died quickly, and one of those buttons went underneath our cabinet that our microwave sits on. Well, basically, we were getting ready for bed. I get out of the shower and I hear the button go, "Feed me, Daddy." Well, JT usually is feeding the dogs at this point, so I thought he was trying to pick this back up to teach the dogs, how to use the buttons. So I go into the kitchen and I was like, "Oh, are you teaching him the button again?" He's got this look on his face. He's like, I didn't press that. And so I was like, that's really weird. I'm like, and I go and I look under the cabinets, the button's still under there. And I look at it, I'm like, everything seems fine. It was used maybe twice, so the batteries shouldn't be a problem. And so we were like, okay, that was weird, whatever. And we go and we lay in bed, and suddenly from the kitchen, we hear, "Feed me, Daddy." Yeah. And JT literally just goes, "Madison, if it does it one more time, you're going to have to go out there and tell it to go away."
Literally, I did.
He was so freaked out. He's like, "We are not doing this."
Well, it's just like, it's like, what, like, God, it's like, I swear if I married anyone but you, this wouldn't happen.
That's very true.
You'd pony up and be like,
But no, I wouldn't encounter ghosts.
Yeah, ghosts
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
We were on the couch. We were literally on the couch 3 nights ago, and we watched Bachelor. Okay, and we love Bachelor, and we're just watching Bachelor, and I see my wife do like this number where she like turns over to the left towards the kitchen, and out of absolute nowhere, she says, "There's a ghost in here," and I'm like, what?
Her name was
she's
Rosemary, so
yeah,
she was just hanging out.
And yeah, you felt like her name was Rosemary. You started to feel these things about this ghost, and I'm just over here like, well, then go sage it or something.
Go sage it.
I'm like, no, she was just hanging out. She was just kind of like exploring. She wasn't annoying, and that's the thing. I won't make you leave if you're not annoying. It's like, she was interesting because her name was Rosemary, and the way that started to come about is I saw her over there. She was like an older lady with long gray hair.
Yeah, that's not scary at all.
Yeah.
And I smelled like a really strong scent of like roses.
Yeah, you did.
And I was like, oh my God.
And you're watching Bachelor? Wait a minute.
Right? I know, right? She was like, I love the show.
Let's just hope it's not the final rose.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, no. And then I smelled the roses. And I was like, do you smell the roses and stuff? And then he's like, no. And then I was like, and then I start getting the name Rosemary in my head. I'm like, oh, she's just trying to tell me her name. And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, I'm just here. When you live under an Airbnb, something people don't understand is that a lot of people have ghosts, and then they realize I'm there, and they pop in. They make unannounced visitations
during Bachelor.
Yeah,
dude, they're interrupting my Bachelor time. Bachelor Nation, would you stand for that? Absolutely not. You go sage it.
No.
Go sage it. It's worth saying, people are more likely to be haunted than houses. For every haunted house that you've ever heard of, people are far more likely to attract supernatural activity, to attract ghosts, because we are alive, because we're interesting. Old abandoned houses have spirits that are trapped by location, but there are a lot of homeless ghosts out there. There are ghosts that do not have a specific reason. They're not there to avenge their death. They're not there because they're there because they didn't go anywhere else, and they have nothing to accomplish here. Their unfinished business is staying on this plane, being alive. And they just wander. They just wander aimlessly. That's why so many places that, have never had, new builds or, theaters or things like that will have ghosts that have nothing to do with the space, with the, everybody's like, well, go back to the history books, go back and find out who lived there and what, and maybe you can figure it out. The truth of the matter is, lots of roaming ghosts, homeless ghosts, and they will find you. They'll, it's weird. There's a lot of stories of like encountering a spirit in a graveyard. Ghosts do go to graveyards, and they do hang around their bodies because it's the only vessel that they had in life, and so there is a good chance that their one connection and thing. And after everybody else is dead, who knew them, they kind of end up dwelling in that area. But that's also where they see people walking by, and they see people, and they're like, "Oh, that person looks amazing," or even better. Someone like Madison will look and say, "Oh, there they are," and they're like, "Oh, she saw me. I'm going to follow that one."
Yeah,
and they will attach themselves to you.
So thanks, babe.
Yeah, I know my ghosts. I know the ghosts that are. I picked up a cat recently, a ghost cat specifically.
Ghost cat.
Yeah, so that's my newest addition. But I know the ones that are around me, and so that's why I can really tell when there's a new one that's there.
All right, let's get on to the next one.
Your brain needs support, and new Ollie Brainy Chews are a delightful way to take care of your cognitive health. Made with scientifically backed ingredients like Thai ginger, L-theanine, and caffeine, Brainy Chews support healthy brain function and help you find your focus, stay chill, or get energized. Be kind to your mind and get these nootropic chews at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Here we go. Shogun Kinpo asks, so where do ghosts get their clothes?
Modesty.
Interesting.
They form it because they remain modest. They remain because they were raised to be clothed. When they form themselves, they are utilizing whatever creates their apparition, because their apparition is not a physical thing. It's not, it is how they try to show themselves. And I've talked about this before. I believe that ghosts have stages. When they're full apparition, they are presenting as closely as they can to the person that they were in life. And unless that person was always naked, they're going to present with clothes. over time, they lose that definition and they just become a shape, and then you get these shadow shapes, these figures that you're like, oh, well, there's a man there. And that kind of delineates, the clothes or even the face, the form, it gets hazy. And then, of course, it goes to mist because it's not even holding the human shape anymore. It is now just an entity that exists and is present, but can't really look like something. And they're all desperate for form, and I've said this many times. If you see a spirit that doesn't seem to have a form and you start to give it form, it will assume it. It'll be like, oh yeah, I'll be that for you. Yeah. You need me to be Abe Lincoln? I'll be Abe Lincoln.
Right.
He had a beard, right, and a top hat. Okay, all right, I'm doing it. Which is why you should never look at a shadow and say demon,
right.
Because they were like, oh yeah, I could do demon. I know demon, because a lot of people will encounter demons that are like textbook picture demons. It's like, that's probably not what a demon looks like, actually, but because it's trying to be what we want, we're like, demon. It's like, demon. Yeah, what does a demon look like? Oh yeah, it's got horns, it's got a big tail and a tongue, and it's like, is this good? Am I doing good? And you're like, and that must be good. So be mindful. All right. Ghosts are looking for some kind of form to hold on to.
Yeah, I would definitely say most spirits are wearing their favorite outfit or whatever they felt represented them the best. You never see, unless they were buried in their favorite outfit, you never see spirits in, whatever they were buried in, like
funeral garb.
Yeah, funeral clothes, because honestly, they're usually stuffy and ugly,
Well, and you will oftentimes see them in what they died in.
Right, that's
because
a different
that was
point.
An impression of their last moment of life. They're clinging on to the very last moment of their life, and they're presenting as that last moment, and usually that's with violent death,
right?
That's kind of where you get this notion of the bloodied and the wounded. It's because in those moments of the high anxiety, it's like a very peak moment of psychic energy, and it sticks. That's how they present themselves, because they want people to know when they see them what happened to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it's the same logic of like, if you died in your sleep or something, you're not necessarily going to wear the same outfit forever. Because I know I've heard people be like, I don't want to die in ugly pajamas because I don't want to be in ugly pajamas for the rest of my existence. That's not really the case. I truly think, like, most people, it's because I've seen spirits that are like super dressed up to the nines and whatnot, but then I've seen some spirits, especially some of the elderly spirits that live in Savannah. I've seen like one guy who was wearing like a purple hoodie and like, some baggy sweatpants and stuff.
Must be comfortable.
Oh yeah. Well, that was just the outfit he liked. And I think that's what truly matters, because a lot of our personality and our, the way we carry ourselves is through our clothes and how we present ourselves to people. So it would make a lot of sense of why you would choose an outfit that you felt represented you.
And you hear all the time people talking about a specific garment that the person was wearing, and that garment being the identifying thing. It's like, oh yeah, he was wearing a red coat. Well, that was blah 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 blah. Or he was wearing the purple hoodie. It's like, oh, Jim used to always wear that purple hoodie. So you get these ideas that they are identifying themselves with what they're wearing as well, something that is recognizable as them or presents them.
Exactly.
All righty, on to the next one, and Chris, you're gonna love it.
Oh, good.
Burke Dirk _
Burke Dirk. I already love it.
Asks, why are Dybbuk boxes so scary?
It's weird. And technically I would say that a Dybbuk box is so scary because of that terrifying eBay story. Because I think that there was always a simple reverence around Dybbuk boxes. They were not common to everyone. It is particular to a faith and is particular to a practice. And even the concept of a Dybbuk itself is a little innocuous to begin with, but it generated so much because once a spirit is trapped in anything, such aggression occurs. And the reason why we trap spirits And a Dybbuk box isn't the only type of box. A small wooden boxes are used in many different faiths and many different things to capture and catch ghosts. In certain parts of the world, they'll even use an egg. They'll take a spirit and make it go into the egg, and then there's a huge ritual around the egg to ward it, to combine it, to to create a ritual of passage for whatever spirit it is.
Eggs are very protective.
Eggs are very protective because spirits cannot. They recognize the functionality of an egg in the system, the spiritual system of existence. That it is a nebulous place before existence. It is a symbol of the soul. We use it as the symbol of the soul a lot. So eggs and other things, whatever we use to capture ghosts. But the Dybbuk box is different because it is a very fierce, fortified barrier, and the spirit is now trapped inside. And that, even if the spirit wasn't particularly aggressive or terrible, that will make it terrible. That will make it vengeful. That will make it all the more dangerous.
You've kind of like imprisoned it.
You have imprisoned it.
You've imprisoned it.
And that is one of the things that people have forgotten about. Any tool we use to limit a spirit, even the rites of exorcism, to limit a spirit, is really binding it and really putting it in a position where it cannot, be free.
Sure.
And that is, in my estimation, that is the core of the danger of a Dybbuk box, because a Dybbuk inherently has properties that are harmful. That could be harmful, that are usually closely related to revenge and death and deceit and pain. But you take an entity like that and you put it in a small box and basically say you'll never get out. Imagine just bouncing around in that box, waiting for someone to be foolish enough to open it,
like a genie or hell.
Like a genie. Well, and that's a good point. Genies are very similar to the Dybbuk, because we think that genies are rub the lamp and get wishes. No, the jinn are a very potent, frightening, and terrifying entity with vast powers. And when we trap them, they're not waiting to serve us. They're not hoping we're going to let them out and be like, let me give you some stuff. No, they are going to be full of wrath and vengeance and anger.
Yeah. And outside of the, spirit being stuck in the box thing, a lot of it, I feel like, comes from the fact that, any type of witchcraft has always been demonized throughout history, even if it's for good and things like that. Partially because a lot of things with witchcraft, they look horrifying, specifically protection things. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a witch's jar, but good God, it's horrifying looking, because it's a jar with nails in it and urine and for real, like, it's a thing. It's very protective, very potent and successful. So if you do that, I understand why, but it looks horrifying. And then you usually put like black candle
with a black candle
wax on it, and that only heightens it. And then same thing with Dybbuk boxes. A lot of times they have sigils on it, pentagrams, which are both protective things, and then, the same black candle wax and whatnot, and makes it look even more horrifying. And so people who don't understand that those are all protective measures see that, and they're like, this is dark magic, this is evil magic. And that's not the case.
No, it's not.
So,
especially with a Dybbuk box.
Right.
A Dybbuk box, has to be, I believe it has to be overseen by a rabbi.
Right.
It definitely.
What?
Yeah.
No way.
Yes.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
You cannot just trap a spirit. You have to use very specific rituals, especially.
So it's a Jewish thing.
It is a Jewish thing. Yes. A Dybbuk is a Jewish entity that derives from either acts of violence or deep-rooted aggressions and angers. It's kind of like if a mood could become an entity, it becomes a Dybbuk. The Dybbuk kind of sways your actions, makes you do things against the will of God and against the will of man. So there's a lot of a conversation of Dybbuks, and I'll go on the record and say I'm not really well versed in it, but those are the things I understand about it. It's not a simple, put the ghost in a box and blah blah blah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's
a process.
It's a process, and in my understanding, there are many Dybbuk boxes in the world, but they are usually guarded familially. They're usually held. Somebody captured it, and they're like, "It's your responsibility now."
Sure.
And the family takes on the responsibility, and they I've heard many occasions where people are like, "Yeah, I was up in the attic and I found this," and you're like, "No." So yeah, just be mindful that by the nature of the beliefs around it, the Dybbuk box is full of a deep aggression and a deep desire to come out, and when it comes out, it will seek vengeance on all living things around it.
All righty, here we go. Moving on. We have a question from Kirsten.Doria. What are your thoughts about pictures of ghosts having reflective eyes? Do you believe an apparition can show up with red eyes on film?
So on film, I'm assuming you're referring to like
a film camera.
Like a film camera.
Well, intriguingly, when you see like red eyes in photographs, the reflective flash off of things, it's literally reflecting off of the interior of your pupils. It's coming back as red eye. But we talk about this a lot. Spirits are attempting to look like something. They're attempting to look like things. And one of the things that I found, because I've seen a couple of very compelling like night vision things where the spirit had what is normally reserved for animal eyes. When you see in night vision an animal look into a night vision camera, it usually glows with a very intense light, and it's like really creepy when you see like an animal in that. Humans generally don't give off that like shine because animals have their eyes refract higher so they can see in the dark. And we do too, but not like animals have practical night vision. We don't really have that much night vision, so you should be able to see like the weird glints. But when you see something that's like super bright in the eye, it's possible that you're dealing with something that is trying to form a human form and maybe has something left over of an animalistic tendency.
Demon.
For lack of a better term, demon.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's always a weird concept of, whenever something is paranormal looking in a photo and then there's something off about it, it always brings up questions because honestly, it's very rare to truly get a photo of an entity with reflective eyes.
Right.
I've seen maybe a few.
Even with eyes at all.
Right.
Meaning that it's not so clear.
Right, exactly. Where they look like it's just kind of vacant usually. I would agree with you, Chris, that it more than likely is something that's trying to manifest and it's attempting to do something.
Right.
And that could also mean in the way of they are only able to form with lizard eyes or,
Right. There was a video a long time ago, and I want to say it might have been French, where they go into the cemetery and there's a girl sitting on a bench in the cemetery, but when she turns, it looked like she had lights for eyes. They were so bright and so like when she turned, it was so alarming to see. And of course, the person taking the video ran away, which is the appropriate response, by the way.
Right.
It ran away. But I always think about that when people talk about strange eyes because of the level of light coming out of the eyes. It was just so bizarre because it did not look faked. Like it did not look like a digital effect. It did not. And it was really before digital effects were readily available to people. So it was like, how would you do that? How would you make it? Because you could see her eyes, but the light coming out from them was uncanny.
And I have this feeling that, like, you know, there's something that happens with cameras that detect reality differently than we do.
Absolutely.
You know, because I'd be interested if we ever caught a photo of it, but there's an entity here in this building that has red eyes that I've seen personally. And I don't know if that would necessarily come across in a photo, even though I know that it does.
But that's worth talking about, too, is that the connotation of red eyes generally is demonic. It generally isn't a human entity with red eyes. Unless you're telling the story Red Eyes, in which you're looking at the burning coals that they placed in the eye sockets of a pirate. But and that's a totally different thing.
Right.
You know, like you do.
As one does.
I actually think they burned his eyes out with a red hot poker, and his eyes glow red. Red Eyes, if you live in any coastal town that may have had pirates, you probably have heard the story of Red Eye. It's Red Eye. It's a pretty famous pirate tale or ghost story.
Sure.
Past that, if you see red eyes in the dark, you're either dealing with Mothman or a demon.
I wish. It's not Mothman.
It's not Mothman.
No,
and Mothman is
my wife would leave me for Mothman.
Is that Mothman's eyes are big and round, not normal eyes. They look kind of like big bug eyes.
Yeah.
I noticed strangely enough that most ghost photos are caught on iPhone cameras. Like just your
it's
regular
really coming out,
camera.
but I think it's because we take far more pictures.
That's true.
It's how many pictures, not necessarily the number of times we're taking pictures with our iPhones versus when we used to just have cameras.
Well, when you had to pay
to
get them printed.
So, I would say here's what I would say about that though, because so like if I have my Canon EOS R, if I again I mentioned that it's all digital for me, it always has been. So that's like my go-to is my like digital camera. So the EOS R, if I have that, I'm sitting there and you're right, I'm taking less photos because I'm in a different lighting situation. I have to make adjustments, and I got a 50 on, and I need to get wider, just stuff like that. But you can also say that the iPhone exposes automatically to the best, what's going to look the best. It's automatic exposure. You can manipulate the f-stop and all of that stuff.
But it has an automatic setting.
But it's got the automatic setting. And almost everybody I even use the automatic setting. I don't go into the settings of my iPhone and change the f-stop ever, really. But with the EOS R, any professional filmmaker is never going to use automatic mode. You're just not going to do it, and so I think that a lot of it is perfect exposure.
It is, but it's also, keep in mind that the iPhone is also an incredible tool of communication. It has all kinds of different devices in it that tell it where it is, how it moves. It's transmitting, it's receiving at all times, which means that it is also a conduit. It is an excellent thing for a spirit to know that there is all this extra communication. We don't have a firm understanding of like how Wi-Fi and paranormal necessarily come into contact, how Bluetooth and paranormal necessarily have come into contact. But it's worth noting that an iPhone is more than a camera. It is a telecommunication device. It is, and since the beginning of phones, people have told ghost stories of getting ghostly calls in the middle of the night, of having all these things happen. So it also might be the fact that it is a communication device that is also being used to capture imagery, which also now brings me to the wonder, if you turned on your Wi-Fi on your DSLR, would that increase your chances? Because now it's transmitting. It's now transmitting and receiving signal. Maybe that is another level of ghost hunting paraphernalia.
That's interesting.
So worth the experiment. The next time we go out ghost hunting, we might want to try to hook, because you can hook it up to your phone, right? The Canon R5.
What, the EOS R?
The EOS R.
Yeah, the EOS R. Hook what up to the phone?
Like to
Wi-Fi.
the Canon app.
Oh,
via
yeah.
Wi-Fi.
Oh, yeah. You can.
I think if that were running, there might be a communicative
Sony
structure.
The A7S3. The A7S3, you can use this as a separate monitor.
Yeah,
and you can record off of it, and you can take it like 30 feet away.
I wonder if that's something worth experimenting with. Is the difference between taking pictures, straight from the camera or utilizing that Wi-Fi tether. Sure. If it creates some kind of interesting effect.
Interesting. All righty, let's go to the next one. Joe Hargroves 1 asks, can someone be sensitive in the sense of predictive dreaming? There's times that dreams mean nothing at the time, but play out at a later date.
Yes, that's called claircognizance. So basically, claircognizance is the when you have predictive dreams, you've got knowledge that you typically should not know because nobody has told you it. It's essentially, a lot of people used to believe that it was like divinely bestowed on you as a
prophecy.
Exactly. Like, all of those stories in the Bible of people having dreams, that's essentially claircognizance or having prophetic dreams, or they're being given this knowledge for a reason. So
Nostradamus,
Joseph.
Yep, exactly. All those people that you've heard of, it's all the same thing. It just comes across a little bit differently. It's less grandiose in a non-storytelling way, But a lot of people, it can be simply, it starts out with deja vu and stuff like that. And then as they hone in on it, they start to be able to decipher what those dreams are. I've heard of it. Actually, it's Radar, who had a dream one time where her friend, she had a dream where her friend was there. She couldn't see him, but she knew he was there. And it was all white. And she just knew that he was really badly hurt. And that was it. Along with it was going to be near the new year. So she was like, okay, that's weird, whatever. And then she calls the friend and is like, hey, I had a weird dream about you. I had a dream that around New Year's that you were going to get really hurt. And so maybe be careful around New Year's or something. And they were like, whatever, completely dismissed it. Well, on New Year's Eve, basically, she gets a call from this person and they were like, hey, guess where I am? And she was like, I don't know, where are you? She's like, he's like, I just got into a skiing accident and I'm on my way to the hospital and I have to have surgery because I tore my ACL. And so basically the white that she was able to distinguish was the snow. And stuff like that. It was the snow, and the reason why she could feel that, she didn't have all the details, she just knew that something was going to happen, and that's what happened. So that's a good example of people who have those sort of dreams, and some people are able to fully dive so deep into them that they're able to get names, numbers, There was a really interesting episode of Unsolved Mysteries, which honestly, in my opinion, I think was a little bit solved. It was,
not nearly as unsolved as they think.
Yes. And
was kind of solved. Well, they just never found her.
They just never found her body, but they knew what happened. And so basically, this woman, she moves into this apartment, and her daughter basically was seeing this woman in her room, and she became friends with her and things like that. And so she would ask her who this woman was, yada, yada, yada. The daughter would tell her, and she just thought it was an imaginary friend. Well, she started having dreams where she was flying over locations, and she was getting dates. She was getting street names. She was getting what was it? It was coordinates. Mm-hmm. And she didn't know where this place was. And then she did some digging on the daughter's imaginary friend and realized that this woman who she was seeing was the woman who lived in that apartment prior, but she's been missing. And so she put the two and two together, went to the police, and is like, hey, I think I know where this missing woman is, yada, 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 gives them all this detail. And they were able to connect the crimes because of this woman's dreams. Definitely an interesting episode to watch. I only gave you the skim details for time's sake, but basically, because of her prophetic dreams that she had never had before until moving into this apartment, it's she was able to help give some clarity to this crime, in my opinion, help solve it, but it's still unsolved because it didn't.
It is fascinating because there's a scary aspect to the future. If it's set, if you can see it. It really raises the question of free will. It really raises the question of what's going on. But one of the interesting things that I had heard, because it has to do with divination, like whether or not you should. I strongly always tell people, don't try to see the future. Don't look for the future, because our human experience seems to be about experiencing life one day at a time, about being in the present. And there are certain people who have been gifted sight into the future for whatever reason. But the story that always came to mind was this concept that there's this book of everything, the book of life, the book of, God said, this is it, guys. And all the angels came together, because I think in Genesis there's actually a passage in which God shows the plan and everyone says, this is good.
Okay.
They all said this is good, and it's like, well, who are they? Anyway, it's the host. It's the angels, and this is before the war in heaven. So before the war in heaven, God shows all the angels the book, and they all say that's a great plan from beginning to end, perfect. Then the war in heaven happens. It splits. The demons are, of course, fallen angels, the ones that could not defeat God. They fall into the pit. And many people say that the pit is actually earth. They fall to earth. And there they are amongst us. Guess what? They saw the book. They know the future, and they can leverage the knowledge of the future to ensnare us. So when a spirit offers us visions of the future or tells us about the future, you might be dealing with a demon who is basically trading on the knowledge. And that becomes like why it's different when you are like asking the Ouija board, where am I going to work? What's my job going to be? And things like that, because you don't have control over who's answering the questions versus being asleep and traveling through the planes and being granted this information, because we have a long history of divine prophetic moments where you're being given insight to the future. And I've talked about this before, that time is this illusion we created so that we can experience the entirety of existence. We do it piece by piece, but it's all already there. All of time is already one big ball. It's not moments strung together. It's just we have to define it as it appears in our consciousness. Like we're chewing our way through an apple, like we're
that reminds me of my favorite circle of hell in Dante's Inferno.
Everybody should have a favorite.
Yeah,
mine is literally the first.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I really, really love the circle of hell where the fortune tellers are walking around for eternity. It's like in the dark, and their faces are turned to the back of their head.
Yeah.
Because so they can never see what's in front of them. When I read that,
insane.
I was like, oh, that's so good. That's so good, because I got this like nasty, crazy visual. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
No,
it's really interesting.
And I think that comes to it. That comes to this idea that if we are meant to know, we'll know. If we're not meant to know, we won't. And when we try to bridge the distance, you risk things. I'm not saying that's all bad. I'm not saying that it's all contaminated or it's wrong. I'm just saying it's what you should be aware of, because our perception is developed for a very specific purpose in the very specific way. Just like not being able to see ghosts, not being able to, those things are reserved for people who are guideposts to us. Not necessarily everyone. Not everyone should see ghosts. Not everyone should be in tune with these things. But without people who can and without people who know, we would have, our sense of wonder would be deeply, deeply diminished.
And I find also that a lot of times people don't consistently have prophetic dreams and stuff like that. Sometimes they have one prophetic dream and that's the only time they ever have one. And I feel like it's almost, whoever you're having the dream about, it might be their spirit guides, like saying like they're not listening, and sometimes it takes things like another person having a dream and being like, hey, I had this dream about you. Maybe you should think about this. It's not always grandiose in the way of like predicting a major world event or things like that. A lot of times it's about people that and you're in their circle, which means that you're susceptible to their guides, their, protective beings and whatnot. So, and if you haven't listened to our I think it was our latest ghost mail with, I believe, Ashley Werner's story, where she...
It was the third ghost mail, not the fourth. So it was the second to last.
Cool. Yes. Listen to that one about her dream where she had the dream about her friend who had been killed and laid
the tall grass.
Yep, in the tall grass. It's one of those sort of situations where, it was for a reason, because maybe they needed that information and nobody else is going to be able to acquire that information.
And sometimes, too, it is not about stopping the event. It's not even about, sometimes it is more about being reassured of the synchronicity of life and of the concept of a plan. Being able to see something that comes to pass might just be about suggesting that time is the illusion and that our existence is divine in a lot of ways. So being able to see these things could conceivably, like, the guy who breaks his leg coming down a ski slope, the rest of his life, he's going to know that someone had a dream that it would happen. Yeah. And all of a sudden his world is just a little more, a little wider. It's a little more open. So that could be it too, is that we're all fiddling with a dial. We're all learning to accept a world that is more wondrous than we know day to day.
Comment and let us know if you want us to do an episode on Nostradamus, because I think that's
Nostradamus is amazing.
It's so cool,
so fascinating.
But let's go ahead and let's ask this last question, and this is Taylor and Luke. Yep. When she asks, when mirrors are fogged up from a shower/bath, does it blur the lines between our realms? Does it make it easier to communicate? I might regret asking.
We all know how I feel about mirrors.
And bathrooms.
I know, right?
Put them together. No. That is an excellent question. What an excellent question, because I have many times come across ghost stories that involve writing on a mirror that's been fogged up. Like coming out of the shower and looking at the mirror and seeing words like scrawled, like somebody had written them with their fingers, to the point at which I actually had an experience where I was kind of being terrorized around the Savannah Theater, as a matter of fact, and I found myself locked in the building, and I was standing at the window, the glass doors, and a voice, like very clearly inside my head, said, "Fog up the glass with your breath and I'll write you a message." And I was like, no, thank you. That is not what I need right now. So I think that if we're talking about just the mirror aspect and the spirits behind the mirror concept and fogging it over, does that make it easier to communicate back and forth? I almost think if there is a spirit, as I've said this many times, it is honestly just my own childhood anxiety stemming from this book that may or may not exist. I think that any fogged mirror, any covered mirror, might make the spirit a little agitated. There's a sensation, and I have phobias. I have a lot of phobias, bathrooms phobia. So when a mirror is fogged up, I just imagine whatever's behind the mirror, like really wanting to see, like you've obscured its vision. And I think, yeah, it might be easier to communicate with it, but I think it might be very agitated as well. So, yeah, that's a really thoughtful question, because it's about obscuring the line. Because on the other hand, by fogging up the mirror, whatever's on the other side might feel more comfortable.
Sure.
Might feel, emboldened, because you can't see what's going on the other side of that glass. And maybe the reflection that you do see through the fog doesn't have to be perfect, so it can present itself a little, a little clearer for itself, but it's obscured. Yeah, those are all interesting and fascinating.
It makes me wonder if you can write in a mirror in the fog and communicate.
Well,
I knew a woman who said that she did.
Oh.
She would write hi, like on the mirror, like just smear it with her finger before she goes in the shower, and when she comes out, she'll be able to see the hi, but there's usually some mark that's there, and she would always
like, what's up?
Well, it was never words with her, but she would say that there would like be something that looked like someone ran their finger down at the bottom or something, like they were trying to say something.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I've met people who said that full messages, they came out. One guy said that he came out, and on the mirror it said, "I know why I died."
Oh, Lord.
Was written on his mirror.
Bruh.
And he was sure that one of his friends had come in and done it, and they swore up and down that they didn't go into the bathroom, and he was like, somebody came in here and did this, but it said, "I know why I died." And then shortly he moved out. Shortly thereafter, he just left.
Madison?
Yeah, I just, it's a tricky question because, like, yes, I totally agree with the whole concept of, like, being able to communicate. I feel like that's solely because they're just there to communicate already anyways. So it would just make it a little bit simpler to be able to write them a message and things like that. Because, I mean, think about, like, when you're locking a mirror, you're using a sigil usually, and that's imprinting into the mirror. So I feel like that's definitely a thing. I don't know if it necessarily makes the veil thinner between the two realms. And I mean, like, it's possible that, like, the entity could get agitated with, like, the fogging. But
Maybe.
Part of me is, like, I feel like if they're constantly watching, they know routines.
Sure.
And they're like, I know what this means. Like, they'll eventually get to learn, like, oh, it'll clear up in a second.
Right.
It's like, so I feel like, maybe don't write messages to entities on the other side of the mirror. But it's an interesting concept, and it is definitely something worth looking into.
Absolutely. It's kind of a brilliant question. I never really thought about it.
Yeah. I mean, it honestly, it's a good way to refresh your sigils too on your mirrors,
That's a good
relocking
point.
them, like every once in a while, just giving a little, like, into the mirror in the fog. I've never thought about doing that, but it's definitely an interesting concept. But, thank you guys for always sending us really interesting questions and always being very insightful. They're always fun to answer. So if you want to answer or ask some more questions, please definitely utilize our TikTok. You can find it under the Q&A button on Haunted City Podcast. That is the only place I pull questions from, just because it gets very tedious to go through all the TikTok comments and things like that. So if you want to make sure that your question is answered, that is the place to do it. But if you enjoyed today's episode, please remember to like and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, or give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those other good platforms. But with that, I think that is all we have for you today. So my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.